Have I peaked? Is this my life? Is this it? Or maybe you're not in an okay place, right?
Deep desire for growth, but then I fear the void. I'm facing this dilemma is, what does my soul need now? The world will always demand more and more and more and more and more, but you are enough. Fragments of our being that carry out like deepest wounds. They also have the greatest wisdom. HDL, get ready to transform your life. Meet Mackenzie. Some of you've experienced her. You listen to her podcast. You know her. She's a powerhouse transformational coach with her expertise in somatics, human design, and Reiki. She's here to guide you to an empowered, purposeful, and abundant life. The host of the North Star podcast. So if you have not listened, go down there. Click on it. Let's pause the show right now and let's go look up on Spotify and Apple, the North Star podcast. Mackenzie's strategies and soulful insights will spark your truest self. So we're going to dive in today. I sent you some questions. Thanks for being on the show again.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. It's always fun to be here with you.
Yeah. I sent you some pretty intense questions because I thought, and I saw like a week ago on Instagram, you were studying them.
Oh my God, yeah. I have a notebook in front of me. I'm like, doing it's like a great test. Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought it was really cool, but I wanted to start the show based off an article that you wrote, and you have a newsletter and people can go on there and subscribe to your newsletter on your website, and we'll have that in the show notes. We encourage people to do that. But, and I think one of the themes are like your work, like your life work touches beautifully on navigating difficult internal states. And we were just talking about that off air. And the article that you wrote, it talks about how heavy uncertainty can feel. And I know we talked about this on my last podcast, but I think it was like 2 or 3 episodes ago on your podcast, you addressed feeling stuck or even going backwards. So from your perspective, why do you think these experiences, this unknown future, the feeling of personal stagnation, why do you think it triggers such strong emotional and mental responses?
Yeah, I think at the core, they could all be different things based on, what exactly is going on in your life. But I think the through line with it, no matter who you are, it comes down to this lack of safety, right? So in all of those scenarios, you're feeling unsafe. So whether you're not sure what your future holds, whether you're feeling like stagnant and you're kind of like, and again, this is where it could all be different, but your thought might be, is this all that life is? Or like, if you're kind of like at an okay place, you might be sort of existential like that. Like, have I peaked? Is this my life? Is this it? Or maybe you're not in an okay place, right? And then you're just kind of like I was going to swear. I'm not sure if that's okay on the show, but kind of like, oh
Yeah,
no.
yes, go ahead.
I was going to be like, oh shit. Like, is this,
Right.
am I just stuck in this place forever? This doom and gloom. I don't have enough money. I don't feel the way I want to feel health-wise or whatever it is for you. So obviously there could be all these different thoughts that go to it, but ultimately at the core of it, it's this like lack of safety. And so this fear of what am I up against and can I handle it? Do I want to handle it?
Yeah, no, I know. For me, it's kind of the same thing. It's like, when you're standing at the edge, we've all gone to, and you take a lot of beautiful pictures on your Instagram, and we'll put that in the show notes too for everybody to follow, because you have you're all over Europe and everything else. But, when you're at the beach and you're standing there and your like feet are in, you're in the sand, but then you look out at the ocean and it's like vast. And it's a lot of it's unknown, you know what I mean? And I feel like feeling stuck is kind of that same way. But when I look at the ocean, there's a beauty to the expansiveness of it, and so I think a lot of times the illusion of control is the ego, but in reality, that fearful feeling is the soul's cry for expansion.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like the beauty of the ocean. It's like, oh my God, and we all have this desire to explore, and fear holds us back from that. So it's this confined of the current reality. So for me, the trigger is like this profound response, soulful wise, at the core of our being, to have this, like, I want to say it in the right way, an innate desire for growth. But then I fear the void. I don't know, the unknown, or I feel the stagnation.
Yeah.
What do you think, like when you're looking at like stagnation in particular, what do you think that is? And I know in your writings, you talk about like future tripping.
Yeah.
Why is this grounding in the present so fundamental, especially when we're facing something that's so internal with these overwhelming feelings?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I believe we see so often in pretty much everyone probably who's ever lived is like when we when we're not in the present, we're really occupying the mind, and the mind, there's so many people who speak differently to this, but I'm not sure if you've heard this before or if you resonate with it, but I love this idea that I've heard that like we use our minds too much. Like we overuse the mind and we use it in a way that it's not meant to be utilized.
Right.
As someone who has that tendency towards doing that, like quote unquote, like overthinking, I completely agree with that. And I think this, that's a byproduct of school and like all of this kind of stuff. But we kind of go through the world in this disassociated from like the reality, not in a clinical sense, but we're moving through, we walk down the streets, we're on our phones, or we're just in our heads and we're not thinking about, or rather, we're not living, we're not connected to the world around us. And so I do feel like on the flip side, like the benefit of this presence is connection, right? Like connection with the world around us, ourselves, our bodies, nature, which would be included in the world around us, but I also meant like other people and just like connection in general, which is, how do you feel about that? Like, I feel like that's like the point of life in so many ways, is to have this connection versus this confining within our minds. It's almost like we imprison ourselves in this sort of jail in our heads.
The overthinking. Yeah, that's interesting. So then grounding in the present moment, that's something that you talk a lot about.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate act of surrender, and that's hard to surrender. What are practices you do to be present or to surrender to the unknown?
I think for present, sometimes we try to kind of go from like A to Z. Very often it's like, and I'm someone who like loves podcasts, or on a podcast, like all of this kind of stuff. So if I'm like, oh, okay, like now I just want to take all my walks in presence, no podcast. Like that's like quite a jump from going like, maybe you have a nice hour, day long walk and now you're going to tell yourself you're going to totally change that rhythm. I think that's not necessarily the way to go. Honestly, sometimes for me, if I'm like, I feel like I need to connect and be in the world, but to get myself out the door, my headphones have to be in and I've already pressed play. And I have this thing, and maybe this doesn't work for everyone. Maybe when you first start, you need to be more strict. But for myself, I'm kind of like, I'm going to go outside and I'm going to have this feeling at some point, like I want to take my headphones out. And I'm just going to, when I feel that, the first time it comes up, I'm just going to take them out. And that's like my intention or my commitment to myself. But for someone else, I think if you want to be more just like clear about it, it could be like, okay, the walk is 40 minutes, 20 minutes. I commit to no headphones, like being there with the trees, with whatever you're surrounded by, the cars. I mean, whatever. It doesn't really matter. But I think that those like smaller bite-sized steps, or maybe it's not even 50-50, maybe you're just like 2 minutes of this walk, I'm just going to have nothing and see how you like it. And, your mind will probably love it. So you might notice that and use that as a propeller fuel for the next time.
I love that. Have you ever seen the movie Contact with Jodie Foster?
Ooh, no,
it's like an alien movie. Yeah. No, this is an amazing movie. I mean, I think she won awards on it and stuff. But it's basically
Contact.
There's an alien ship that comes down, and she's the scientist. So she's like languages and all that. And so she's coming into this alien ship, and it's opens, like you can walk inside of it. And there's the aliens speak. They're almost like octopus, type. But you can't see them, but you can see them write, and they're writing in like squid ink, like the octopus ink. Okay. But they're trying to communicate, and it's really, really, she's having a hard time. And so the whole show is kind of like, let's try to communicate. This is the first time, contact. That's what it is. Wow. And it reminded me of when I'm in the present moment, it's the only time my higher self can communicate with me. The divine is in the here and now.
Yeah.
And so most of the time it's like we're trying to talk to an alien because we never really talk to our higher self. But in the present moment, that's when the noise of the mind quiets, and then my heart can speak. And when my heart truly speaks from my heart chakra, I'm speaking to my higher self. And my higher self is that all-knowing wisdom. It's the one that is in all of essence, and it's the real me. So me being not present is not me living my real life, And so I've learned that presence is the portal. If we're going to use like an alien word, it's portal to peace. And it's where I can remember that I'm whole. Yes. And I can surrender because I'm already held by the universe. And that's become a profound practice. Why do you think it's so elusive? Like, why do we have such a hard time being present?
It kind of, I mean, for the first question, I said like there could be a few reasons. And when I was first thinking about this, the obvious answer came to mind of like, oh, there's technology, there's distractions. But then actually, if you like before we popped on, I was thinking about this again and I was like, well, it could also be that, of course, there's so much, of course to you, Jason, there's so much challenges. Like there's so much that we're scared of within ourselves sometimes. And that really can keep us away from, I think that's the bigger
Mhm,
thing. I think due to
mhm,
all of that, that creates this desire to go towards technology or whatsoever, these other forms that are more immediately gratifying. But I think the deeper and the truer probably prevention is actually like what we're so scared to find, right?
Yeah, that's so true. So you're talking about like in the sense of like there's this underlying feeling of being scared.
Yeah, like, I don't really, because I'm thinking, like, even in sessions with, like, my clients, like, so it's so common that, like, the first half of it, they will be telling me about something, and then halfway through, they're like, "You know what? It's not even about that. It's not even about that.
Mhm,
I was just going off about, like, A, but actually it's about B." And I think we do that just with our own self all the time. It's
mhm,
like we've tried to focus on even through thought, like not even using external things. It's just like, oh, I'm just gonna think about for women, for example, is so common is let me just think about like my body and like how I can change my body and like all of like these very common things that not just women but a lot of women can latch on to. But it's like below that, it's like "Oh, I don't want to deal with my family stuff or how do I navigate this
mhm.
relationship issue?" And it's like so much easier to think about these other sort of more superficial things.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think it goes into, talking about having that. I don't want to use the word fear because I think scared is more real.
Yeah.
I know your podcast, you detail about letting go of people pleasing patterns, and that's scary. How might these ingrained habits of placing others first? What have you found when you're navigating your life? Like I said, the last podcast, we talked a little bit about this, but why is it so anxiety provoking?
I think maybe this is obvious, but I do think that really it's because like you're trying to do so many things. It's not only are you trying to tend to your own issues, but you're
Mhm,
also trying to predict what other people quote unquote need or what you think that they need or what however it is that you want to show up for them. So it's like not only are you trying to navigate your own life, but you're kind of also trying to control in
mhm,
maybe not a manipulative sense per se, but it is a little bit
mhm.
manipulative. You're trying to, like, control other people's reactions to you, and there's just so much that you're trying to calculate subconsciously with that. How are they gonna respond? Like, if I show up in this way, will, like, blah, 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 and you might even actually ask yourself this because with really challenging people sometimes in our lives, we can find ourselves going down that path, like, they'll
Yes,
just stay
yes.
at their home over the holidays, for example. How are they gonna deal with that? It's just
So I always look at people pleasing as like in Plato's cave, the analogy, where it's, the shadows are dancing on the wall,
yeah.
and somebody else is putting the shadows and then you're in the cave thinking that it's real. When there's light out there, there's a whole nother world.
Yeah.
It's kind of a dance of shadows, where we're trading our light for this approval.
Mm.
And we think by putting our needs above our own, but in reality, what we're doing is just another, and I like your word scared way, because we don't want to handle the responsibility of what a sacred temple of the self looks like. Do you see what I'm saying? So we can abandon ourself, our true self, by just running around. It's almost another distraction, people pleasing.
Yes. Oh, 1,000 there was one time recently within the past 12 months that I noticed this within myself. Like, I was really thinking about somebody in my life more than myself, and when I noticed that this was, like, really, like, not a good thing, and it was only a matter of, like, a few weeks, but in those few weeks, once I noticed it, I was like, every single time I said to myself, I, like, had to commit to myself, every single time you notice your thought go to that person, how are they doing? Like, over indexing how their life was going. I had to turn it back to myself. Like, I had to
Mhm.
notice it and turn it back to myself. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, yeah, there are true things that this person is struggling with. And there are like, all of that's real. But also, I'm avoiding myself and I'm avoiding,
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z. Yeah.
No, that's so good. I feel like the anxiety amplifies. So when my anxiety, I was telling you this off air, but when my anxiety gets up or my depression's up higher, I know I'm off course. from my spiritual journey, I know I'm walking down a wrong road. So it's kind of like, it's just, it's a good trigger to have. Like,
Mhm.
I'm being anxious towards what this person's thinking. And I'm meditating, because that's what it is. I'm meditating negatively
Yeah.
on, their response or how they're feeling or the way I said it. And they're kind of pissed off at me. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure. So that when anxiety amplifies, like a speaker where it's amplifying,
Yeah.
it's putting out that negative vibration that my ego's so addicted to. And it's just using it, as like a joker, it's not real. And it's just another way to enslave me, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. That's brilliantly said. Yeah, I find that so interesting just to think on. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've noticed that in your own life, like moments that have been heightened in some which way, whether it's anxiety or something else. It's always that cue to look at that.
Yeah, you talk about, 'cause this goes right into it, the practice of honoring your true self and your energy and using that as an anchor,
Yeah.
especially when these external circumstances, because I know so many people are listening to this. How do you do that? Like honoring your true self and your energy, like practically, like day to day. What does that look like for you? And what have you learned in honoring your true self and your energy?
Yeah. I do think at this point in time, well, I know at this point in time in my life, I am more in touch. So it is this thing where not necessarily moment to moment, but hour to hour or whatnot, I can feel if something's off. Like, for example, if I'm working and I notice my breath is shallow. So it's often like tuning into the bodily sensations, right? And how many people say probably to you as well, like all the time, like, oh, I just noticed that I haven't been breathing. Like I've basically been wearing my breath. So there are these like moment to moment or like unit to unit within our day kind of things. But I do think at the start of kind of, wanting to do this more for so many people, it's just at the top of the day. Like this is where people talk about morning routines being so valuable. Like at the top of the day, just like having that check-in with yourself. And if that's the only check-in you do, fine. Like you have to start somewhere, and maybe the next check-in isn't until the next day, in which you reflect on how the day before went and like how you were feeling. And were you able to, when you, for example, the common example that I see, again, is, especially with women, and I'm curious what you see too, but, I'm tired or I'm exhausted, but I still need to go for that walk or that run or whatever. And my it's the time of the month or whatever. Like there's enough going on in my body and yet I'm going to force myself to do this thing and further deplete myself versus what the body and, you could connect that to the soul is really asking for is this rest, this space, this time, as we talked about before, this presence with self versus like further physical depletion. So that's just like these common ways that we betray ourselves, which might be too strong of a word, but there are these.
That's a great word.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Love that.
We do it all the time, right? Like all the time.
You're betraying your true self.
Yeah. Yeah. Every time, to bring it back to what you were saying as well before with the people pleasing, like every time you do something, like an example, I was on vacation with my mom like a few weeks ago and she wanted to go for a walk in the evening and I was so tired and I was like, I can't even imagine. And at first I was like, she asked me and I had this whole thing go in my mind before I even answered one word in response. But at first I was like, oh my God, should I do it? And then I was thinking, okay, if I do it, I'm not going to be a good person. Like I could just time it, like nothing about me wanted to go on this walk, but I felt bad and I felt guilty. And in the end, I was like, I cannot betray this me, like the actual me who really just likes to relax in the evening and not necessarily move my body too much because I've already done a day and it's 8:30 and I just do not want to go out. So I ultimately ended up honoring, but it was really that check-in moment. Like, okay, like what do you want to do? What do you want to do here? How do you want to respond? And it felt like it took like 5 minutes, but it was probably half a second in which that whole conversation went on internally.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's a boundary set with love towards yourself. And that's how I think you have to look at it. It's a pause before saying yes.
Yeah.
You did that. You paused before you said yes. I think it comes from the ego's whisper of you're not enough, because the world will always demand more, 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 more. Yeah. And if you have, I'm not enough, I'm not enough, I'm not enough, I'm not enough, then you're always going to be running around just yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
So it's like understanding your divinity and that you are enough, whether you have to say that a million times a day. Then when you believe that you are enough, it's easy to say no.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I'm thinking like sometimes it's just like to kind of prompt yourself into that, like I am enough is just really noticing how you feel. Like if you're doing this just just to appease someone else, like you're not going to feel okay. Like there's no part of you that's going to feel okay. I think the more you and then noticing as well, like what else is coming up. Oh, there's guilt is so common. Guilt is coming up. And so that guilt cannot drive our lives. So many people get sick physically, I mean, mentally as well, but physically, even chronic illnesses and all of that so often is stemming from this constant betrayal over and over and over again. And yeah, that connection to enoughness is huge, really.
Yeah, I love that. One of the questions that I ask when I'm facing this dilemma is, what does my soul need now? And that kind of like, if you ask that, what does my soul need now? It kind of puts it all into perspective. It pulls you out of the monkey mind and puts you, more into your heart chakra. And that's kind of, because I love like self-aware questions. For me, it works really well. So that's the one I ask, and then am I honoring myself? Like you said, the word betrayal, which honors the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Am I honoring myself? And how does that look like specifically in my life? Me honoring myself. Well, I'm going to tell my mother, no, I love my mom. Doesn't change my love towards her. Yeah. It's just my soul right now is I'm physically tired, and I would just do it out of guilt. And why would you do an action out of guilt? You're actually hurting the other person.
I do believe that. Absolutely.
Because the energy's off, the vibration's off.
Yes. I mean, in the most simplest of words, it's like how many times do we end up like picking some stupid fight in those circumstances? Because you're just like, I don't want to be here. And then that's what you come out, and then you've got a blow up fight, and then it's just never worth it.
Where saying no would have worked out perfectly anyways,
Yes.
Yeah, I see that with mothers because there's so much sacrificial, your kids don't need you 24/7. It's okay, because they don't want the worst part of you, stressed and feeling shitty and guilty. Like you need to take time. And I always encourage women to take time, put yourself first. I know that's hard when you have a kid, but you have to put yourself first. You have to tell yourself that over and over and over again. You talk about, in the article that I was like parts work or listening to different aspects of ourselves and overwhelm. And then one of the things is meeting my shadows.
Yeah.
What does that look like? Could you elaborate on that? On, these concepts or like meeting my shadows? What does that look like for you?
I do feel like, whether you're quote unquote meeting a part or a shadow, to me, these are all just synonyms. I mean, probably the founder of IFS would not love that to be said, but I don't see them to be that different. And I think we use a lot of fancy words for just a simple, simple ideas, basically. Yeah, for both of these. So again, whether you just jive more with parts or shadow, I find it can be as simple as tuning in for a moment and just like closing your eyes and bringing yourself into like a little bit of a meditative state and connecting in. I like to go in through the body, but for some people, they prefer the mind. But if you can go in through the body and notice like where there's tension in the body, see like, can you connect into that tension? See if you can, because so often our minds are kind of like, nope, I'm fine. Like, I'm fine. So if you can like, because I remember doing this with a practitioner and she was like, my shoulder was like constantly tense. So she was like, what is your shoulder saying right now? And I was like, oh, it's saying it's like, I keep using this word, but like exhausted. I was like, it was saying that it's like exhausted. And she's like, okay, like what else? And she was like prompting me to have this conversation with my quote unquote shoulder. But really what it was doing was that through this like tension in my shoulder, it was drawing me into this deeper conversation with a part of myself that I hadn't wanted to have, because this part of myself wanted things that my ego was, not necessarily on board with, doing things that weren't necessarily stroking the ego, resting, which didn't equal productivity, which didn't equal supposed worthiness or whatnot. So basically, however it is that you do it, whether you do it through writing or whether you do it through a sort of meditation, it's coming into contact with yourself and considering what it is that you really need. I mean, honestly, Jason, you said it when you said like, what does my soul need right now earlier? To me, that's not even any different than any of this. And some people will say, oh no, you need to do a deeper meditation. I honestly don't think so. I think you can do this within 5 minutes of just asking yourself, what do I need? And having that conversation with yourself. And
yeah, that's so good. You grew up in Canada, right?
I did, yes.
Yeah. So you guys have the most beautiful lakes, right? I mean, we have some beautiful ones, Lake Tahoe, stuff like that. But I mean, as far as like getting out in nature and being by a lake, Canada is by far the. I mean, you guys like. I think who's better than that? Italy has a couple cool lakes, but I mean, Canada has lakes. Like you guys are there on that. And I know, like I know for you, like sitting by a fire by a lake,
Yeah.
I mean, you probably have memories of that, and everybody does.
Yeah.
And for me, that's kind of like my parts and my shadows. I like to sit by a fire and invite each part to speak its truth to me. And I like to think of it that way. Like I'm sitting by a fire, I'm gonna relax, I'm gonna slow down, I'm gonna breathe into the discomfort, and I'm gonna sit there and I'm gonna have the warmth of the fire because they're just fragments of our being that carry out like deepest wounds, but they also have the greatest wisdom. The parts in the shadows are the scared child, the fierce protector, the quiet dreamer. They're all of those things. They're all living within us, but yet they have the greatest wisdom. And so, like, if I'm sitting by the fire, I'm like, okay, here's a shadow that's coming up. Sitting by the fire, I'm relaxing, feels great. Beautiful lake. I can hear it at night, and then I ask the question, who inside me is afraid? Not because it's not the real me, so who inside me is afraid? Oh, it's Jason when he was 12. And this happened with the rejection, with the girl that he was in love with, or, who needs love? Like, oh, okay, the scared Jason that's never enough in his work. So he always has to work on a Saturday or Sunday, to make sure he's outworking everybody else. Oh, that work, Jason. Oh, okay. That's who needs love right now. So it's kind of like a sacred conversation by the fire with myself, if that makes sense.
Yes. And you did nail a part that maybe people already know, but yes, clearly, by the word parts, there is that indication that there are multiple parts, which you just, explained very beautifully. And I think that's the thing is that's where it comes in so handy is like particularly when we feel conflicted, it's like to have that conversation with those multiple parts of ourselves. And that's where I honestly find like the easiest thing is not even necessarily trying to resolve the conversation, but just like find this acceptance for the existence and way that it all collapses in this positive sense, in the way that like my nervous system seems to just soften and it just like, right, like, yeah, it's okay that all of this exists and all of this is here. Like you have all those Jasons around the fire, like they can all exist and that's okay, is all the resolution, not always, but often that is needed.
Yeah, that's so good. That gets us into, you were talking about on your podcast, discovering a deeper fear beneath a surface one, and then how important it is to explore what's underneath our initial reactions. And you were going into like fear about the future, uncertainty, or feelings of inadequacy, the stuckness. How can we tend to these deeper layers?
Well, I do definitely feel like that is part one really is tuning into those different parts within ourselves, because again, if we're sitting with those sort of topsoil quote unquote problems, whatever you tend to lean on, whether it's dissatisfaction for the women, with a guy or for a girl, who cares, like whatever it is you tend to lean on, you can find yourself like focusing in on this when that doesn't really get you anywhere, and you can find yourself still frustrated and you're like, why am I still frustrated? Like I just dealt with that, but really that's not the biggest issue. And so therefore to actually tend to the deeper parts by doing that work that you just demonstrated there, by actually tending to those parts, I think that's the first step in terms of like nervous system. And then from there, you can go into working with the mind. You can go into reframes. You can go into, looking at yourself in the mirror and whatever it is that really works for you. But I do think you need to start with that part stuff, because that is the deepest. Those are the deepest layers, absolutely. And then from there, you can really go into like, okay, how can I reframe the situation? What do I know to be true? What is my faith? How might my faith, help me with this situation, with reframing the situation? But yeah, I honestly, I lean into parts work and I lean into mirror work. Like I find just like you can't stare at I don't think it's very hard to stare at yourself in the mirror and look at your own eyes and lie to
Yes.
So
That's
that
so
is,
hard to do.
and it's also such a sweet thing when you can find compassion. Because at first, at least for me, and I can just, for me, I'm usually just like, almost like I'll like rant to myself in the mirror, just like explain the problem. And then it's just like, you just find this compassion. It's so hard to look at yourself and just not be compassionate when you're like crying or just distraught. Like you can see in your own flecks of your eyes, like, oh my God, like you need a hug or whatever it is that you need in that moment. So yeah, whatever really suits you. So whether you're more prone to meditation or journaling or this mirror work, but sometimes the mirror work is the most accessible. It's conscious. You don't have to go into the subconscious as long as you have something like a mirror available. can be quite powerful and fast, actually.
Yeah, it's almost like for me, it's like I've been like on hikes alone, in like wilderness or in especially in Washington State or Oregon, you go way out there, go miles and miles. And then, I'm like, oh shit, I'm lost. I don't know where the hell I'm at.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden that fear begins to creep in. Then you
Yeah.
kind of get the little panic attack and
Sure.
you're in the most beautiful place ever. And you're sitting there in your own head, like freaking out, and people do die from that. And I get it. Or, like a bear's going to grab me or a mountain lion's going to get me or something.
Yeah.
There's always these things, and they're all, the odds of it are like, it's like being in the ocean. The odds of getting bit by a shark are like, I always think that every time I go in the ocean, if I swim way out,
Yeah.
and they're all around you and they don't like people, that's the truth, the
Yeah.
logic part of it. Do you think that, because I think every fear, there lies a deeper truth. And that's what you talk about, in the article. It's like peeling back these veils of illusion that got so much emotion attached to them. It's like I'm sitting in the car crying, having a panic attack, just coming to a Starbucks drive through. Why am I freaking out?
Right.
Why?
Yeah, yeah, like, and think we need to ask ourselves those questions because it, as simple as that sounds, it's avoided, and this is not just what I see in myself. This is what I see in speaking with people. Is there's this avoidance of asking those questions, but it's you could ask it in the in whatever dialogue suits you. I know this audience might be different than my own, but like for me, it's like what's going on, like it's like honestly like very like motherly, like, and I didn't
Mhm.
necessarily grow up with that kind of in like household, so often I do need to kind of be that for myself. So it's like, like how, like what's going on here, like what's really eating, like what's not eating at you, but like what's really like upsetting you.
Eating is a good word. Yeah, I like that because it's like
Yeah.
munching. It's
Yeah.
like munching at your soul, like taking parts of you away. That's what I was picturing, like just these little demons eating at you.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, it's funny because I always like if I'm really caught up in something, like it usually comes out first through tears. So it usually is this physical reaction, and then from there, it's often like, okay, like what's going on, and like you don't once you start to ask yourself, at least in my experience, like once you start to ask yourself this question, and I see it in other people as well, it's almost like this like waterfall where like once you start to ask it, it's like the gates open and
Mhm,
all of a sudden it's just like, well, this and this and this, and then it's like,
mhm.
and I guess I didn't want to look at this, but there's this, and then it's just like it's all kind of it's just falling out, and it's just so clear that the gates have been closed for a little while.
Yeah, that's so that's so it's so true. Like you're so right about that. I was just thinking about that. What do you feel like for me, it's like being lost in the woods is like this fear of being alone or I'm separated from everything.
Yeah.
So for me, I have to say, like, I see you, you're not alone. Jason, I see you, you're not alone.
Mhm.
The unlearning and remembering, who you truly are. What do you believe that this depth is so essential? Like you said, the surface layer of that topsoil. Do you think the fear, once you go into it, like, have you gone into fears and then found out it's an illusion or it's not as serious as it was?
Yeah, 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 like that. Or you mean like the deeper fears or like the
Mhm.
more
The
oh,
deeper fear. Like problems like you faced in your own life, like super big fears. That's our patterns. They're just patterns that come up all the time.
yeah, I think I can't say for everyone, but it does seem like very often, like you're saying, like they are these sort of repetitive themes in our lives, and I think there are these like core fears that humans face, like you just mentioned, like a big one for me as well. Like if I get down to the bottom of it, it's like, well, like what if I'm just rejected? What if I'm just left alone? And I think that it sort of
Mhm.
being alone, that solitary, that's like a human animal fear. Like we don't want to be alone
Yes.
in the wild, exactly as you described. Like we don't want that in so much of however it manifests in terms of like, more intricate situations. So much of it does boil down to that of like this fear of being rejected, abandoned. Like even when I'm like, oh, I just feel like I look like, and I'm like saying to my boyfriend, I'm like, I feel like I look gross, like blah, blah, like, and I'm just like down and it's coming out via
Mhm.
the frame of my appearance. And then I'm like, will you still love me? Like, that's like basically the core of what it is. It's like, do you still like, do you love me in when everything's, when I'm, a wrinkly old woman and it's just like all of this stuff. And we just want to know, like, are you going to be there? Is someone going to be there? Like, am I not
Mhm.
going to be abandoned, rejected? And I do think that's the biggest one. I mean, you mentioned it And I think that's just such a human fear. But sorry, to your actual question though.
No. I want to pause you there, Mackenzie.
Yeah.
I think we need to stay on this, especially for women.
Yeah. Yeah.
People have to understand you have in your genes, in your DNA, the trauma and the drama that women experience for tens of thousands of years. And the number one fear, like you're saying, you're saying exactly. So you have to understand a woman's going to amplify that feeling even more because it's resonating with your DNA in the sense of I'm going to get kicked out of the tribe.
Yeah.
This guy is going to find a younger girl and have a baby with her.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Game of Thrones was that way, the
Yeah.
princess with, the hot guy, I forgot his name that everybody loves, but,
I don't know.
he was like the head of the tribe, and then that. So it's that fear of being kicked out of the tribe, being kicked out of the tent, and because that's the worst fear of a woman is to be left alone, to survive but for herself, and so that's once you recognize that it's evolution, and it's not real. Like in this day and age, it's not real. There are people that are, unfortunately listening to this podcast that are alone or maybe homeless or are experiencing, significant, trauma in their lives right now. But for most of us, it's bullshit,
And that's the same, in my experience, the same core fear that comes up whenever people are scared to like start a business, when they're scared to share their voice in any which way. It's like, what if, that person from high school, like that I haven't talked to anyways in like however many years, like what if they see this and they tell other people and then they all talk behind my back, but it's all the same thing. I mean, it's that rejection, even though we haven't talked to them anyway in however many years, but it's all the same thing.
Yeah,
It really is getting kicked out. But what you said is actually what I was going to go to anyway, which is that even though that like core thing in the history of men and women and all this is so real in our actual day-to-day lives, like when I can come down to that root and kind of get to that point of like releasing it, whether it's through tears or tears mixed with laughter is a common one for me. And it's just like crazy town. But that's where I'm like, like this is, nope, never mind. I'm actually okay. But you do have to let it out and you do have to realize what's going on. And then you can be like, if you do have someone, if you do have a friend, like, I think that actually we see this a lot, and I'm not sure about with male friendships, but with female friendships, like things just dissolve because people don't want to talk about it, and you like lose someone. Whereas if you could have just said to her, like, oh, I thought like maybe we weren't talking and I was scared to lose you. And so that's why I pushed you away. Like, again, so much is resolved if we were just more vulnerable and honest about these like core fears. And people don't tend to laugh at you like we think in our minds that they might.
Yeah, they're actually not thinking about you at all. Like
Right.
we're just consumed about themselves. I know in your writing in the podcast, you highlight the power of our internal narratives, and this just flows right into this. How significantly can reframing our perspective impact our experience?
Yeah, I do find this extraordinarily helpful. Again, like, obviously if there's still a lot going on in like the nervous system or the body, like you have a client of mine used an incredible description the other way. She's like, it feels like there's smoke in my lungs. And I was like, ooh, there is some energy in your body.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and she doesn't smoke, so it was nothing to do with the literal smoke. But yeah, so if that's not the case, if you're not heightened, if you're not like shaky, if your body is okay, I do think you can definitely harness that. Whatever reframes work for you, but I know common popular ones that definitely work for me are like everything is working out like as it should, like in my favor, and like it's happening for me, not to me. Like it sounds cliche, but I think that one has been one of the most powerful ones in my whole life, for sure.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it's like a reframing is kind of the alchemy of the mind? It's turning the lead into gold, transferring our suffering, because it's not really suffering.
Yeah.
We follow, Zen Buddhism and into wisdom. But I always like to think of it this way. It's kind of like the lens of a camera. If I take black spray paint and I spray paint these black, and then I try to look through the lens of the world, I'm not going to hardly see anything. But when I shift the lens, when I clean it up and it's perfect, or if I have an old iPhone and I get a new iPhone, the entire landscape changes.
Yeah.
So my thoughts are the lens. If my thoughts are the lens through which the way that I see the world, then why it's just easy to shift the lens.
Yes. And, there is always going to be cynical people who are like, oh, like you can't change, you can't distort, like blah, blah, blah. You know what? Something my dad said to me when I was young, because he's not religious, but he was brought up in like a Catholic Italian, household. And back in the day, Yeah.
I'm watching The Conclave. Have you seen that movie yet?
No, no.
You need to watch it. It's really good. The ending's kind of like whatever, but people would disagree with me on that. But that conclave's coming up because the Pope just died. So it's like his death.
Yes, I did see that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So like they have to all get together and come from all over the world and make decisions and figure out who the next pope is. It's pretty intense. But Italian Catholic, that's all there. I love going to Rome. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So what did your dad say? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I love that. So with respect to that, back in the day, I think this might have been because we did kind of go to church a little bit when I was young. I don't remember how regular it was, but for a little bit until a certain age we did. And I remember my dad being like, it doesn't really matter whether this is all true or whether this isn't true, because if it's just like helping me be a better person or like basically the person you wanted to be, then like there's not really a loss here. And I see that in the same way with these reframes. It's like whether people say like you're deluding yourself or whatever, it's like, well, who cares? Because what's the loss? What's the loss if I'm saying it's meant to like, it's for me versus it's happening to me? Like, I don't see the negative in that reframe. So I just called it
Believing in God, being Catholic,
Yeah.
and you live a great moral life and you have an amazing time and you use the beads to meditate,
Yeah.
all of those different things. Like, okay, that person died and none of that is true,
Yeah.
but they lived a better life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
You
like,
know what I mean? Than just having nothing.
yeah, and I used to date an engineer with the most typical engineering mind that you can ever imagine, and we used to have these debates, let's say,
Seems
but
like it'd be opposite of you. Yeah.
yeah, and this is actually the reason it ended because it was such a bit, I mean, he was like, "I need the truth," and I'm like, "That is ridiculous." The fact that whatever, that is like the most classic thing that
There's
you
no
had.
truth. Like
Y
that
Yeah, it's just I can't
you didn't know it.
it's wild to me that to some people that could be that in and of itself is the drawback, like it being, based off of non,
It's really
verified.
narcissistic.
I do think so, actually.
Yeah, it's like, it's this, and I think that's why here in the United States, that's why it doesn't matter what side you're on, but as far as like the liberals here in the United States, that's why they lost the election is there's the engineering mindset of like, I know better. Whether you hate Trump or not, it doesn't matter, like either or. What I'm saying is this pompous air, that is like, I know the truth, I know better. You guys don't know. You need to elect me because I have all the answers, and I'm not saying either or is because I don't get political on the podcast, but I think it's the same thing. It's this narcissistic view of like, well, I need to know the truth, like, and I imagine like with you, you're in creative fashion and all these different things, which is so,
Yeah.
you know, it's like the flames on a fire, it plays and it's
That's
very,
beautiful imagery. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it kind of goes, the wind blows, so it moves this way, smoke moves this way,
Yeah.
and so fashion's kind of that way, which is good. That's how all art should be, as statements to society. So like having somebody that you dated that was an engineer and so rigid, I don't know how you would
And
function.
that was the worst part because I've never cared what people believe. It doesn't bother me, but it does bother me when it encroaches upon my own way of moving through life.
Yes,
Like the
yes.
try to, well, that's not correct. And this person was honestly so nice. Like just, I mean, it was short, so it didn't do much damage. It was like a 5-6 month thing. But so
Right.
it didn't really impact me in a deep way at all. But for like the last, like, or the aftermath of it all, I was kind of like just thinking about the whole like philosophical argument that was basically that entire relationship. It was just an odd, funny human experience. And I was just like, yeah, like it's funny that some people for just kind of cling on to these, well, it's obviously negative because it's not this like material science textbook kind of way of looking at life. And I just don't see things that way at all. So anyway.
Yeah, no, yeah, science will go get you way far. I mean, if we were in 1880, they were using leeches to bloodlet people and stuff. So, science, when 100 years from now, the humans 100 years from now will look at us as our science as being barbaric. That's what we always do. Look at the 1500s. They thought like we rotated around the sun and the moon was like, not even, it was fake and all kinds of stuff. It's ridiculous, the amount of what science really is. And I'm all for it. We need to continue to go and progress and evolve.
Yeah.
But, to base your whole philosophical viewpoint off that, I think, to get back to, reframing, I think it reminds me of that I'm not a victim, I'm a co-creator. and I co-create my reality with my higher self.
But that's,
You know,
I wanted to ask you actually what your kind of go-tos were. So that's, yeah, that's beautiful.
yeah, I always do. You're already whole. You know, like I use affirmations a lot. So it's like, you are already whole, Jason. You're thinking that you're not whole right now. And I'm not, like you said, I'm not denying the struggle.
Yeah.
I'm just reframing it to be a teacher. If that makes sense.
That's like such a key distinction that I think sometimes people, for some reason, can't wrap their heads around the fact that could even be. That you're not denying. There is sort of this belief that you're obviously denying, and it's just so black and white and not nuanced. But I think that's important that you said that, because
Yeah, and that's what you have in your article about everything is figure outable.
yeah,
And that's a powerful reframe.
that was great. I'm not sure if she has a book on that or whatnot, but I remember back in the day she was definitely podcasting a lot on that, and I was like, it just stuck with me. Like, yeah, absolutely, it is, and I think life shows us that too.
Yeah, and your age group, and because I'm a lot older than you, but your age group and below has this I'm behind narrative. I'm behind. You know,
Yeah.
whether it's Instagram that caused that or whatever it was, I don't know.
Yeah.
How do you is there more empowering thoughts, or how do you address that? Of like, you know, here I talked to somebody that they're like, I'm 23 and I'm behind. And I'm like, you a baby. Like you haven't even started yet, you know. What's the I'm behind narrative? What's that fear?
Yeah, it's funny because I can see my own thoughts go there sometimes, and I think it happens when you're maybe with people that you grew up with. I think that's like a big trigger for that kind of thing. So whether it's like childhood friends or it's family members or something, and you I don't know if you watched that show White Lotus.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah.
Watched all of 3
You
seasons.
did. Okay, so there was like the 3 friends in the most latest season, and
Yeah, that was clear. Yeah.
I think that they'd all like grown up together. It was something of that ilk, and then one was a celebrity, like a movie star, and then one was, you know, very much so not. And there was this like comparison between them, between all of them, but especially between those two, was so stark. And it was just, I think that happens. It's so easy to get there of like, you go back home and maybe, you know, you're not the most satisfied with your life, or maybe even you are, but then you see somebody else and you're like, oh my God, they live in New York City, or like whatever your comparison.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And your mind, I'm not that to me almost seems like a survival thing, actually, when I think about it again. It's like all these things like based, like at the very core of it, it's just like, oh, are they going to get all the food this winter? It's like they have more resources than me. So maybe like I should be worried so that I can start gathering all my food for the winter. Like in terms of like, if we were like back in the day, I think we're kind of comparing who might have the most resources at this like more primal level. And then on this more modern level, I think it's more like, you know, who has more clout. I think that's like where it kind of comes from. Who is more loved? Who is more appreciated by society? So I think these are sort of like our reactions. That's where I think it's not like a very contemplative thought. I think these are like reactive things that come out of us, and then we need to catch that. That's like where meditation, or the meditation of life, comes in, like catching that and being like,
yeah, no, that's so true. Like, you know, I'm behind. The reframe, you know, that I share with people, I think that can put an anchor in this is uncertainty is the womb of possibility. So if I feel like I can reborn myself, I could create a new identity. It's like if you move to a different town, far, far away, get away from your family. I encourage everybody to do that. You know, if you're in the United States, go to Europe. If you're in Europe, you know, come to Canada or Australia, go somewhere different, Bali, wherever it may be. Because, you know, this uncertainty that you're experiencing, it's a womb of rebirth. And there's a scripture in the Bible that says, I can do all things through Christ. And I always think of Christ consciousness. I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. So if I'm in my Christ consciousness, you know, which is my higher self, I can do whatever. So reframing that is to be like, I'm not behind. I just am looking at myself in divine timing to see what I need to, what's the possibilities of me being young? What can I do? You know, what is my higher self looking at, you know, to do? And I think that's a good reframe, you know, because you know as well as I do, universe doesn't rush.
Yeah, no, that's so, I mean, that is so, you said that would ground it, and it really did it. It's very grounding to just hear that. And I think that's so powerful to come back to, for sure.
So if a listener's caught in a tough spot right now, perhaps they're overwhelmed by uncertainty, or they're stuck in these self-negating patterns, people pleasing, comparison, what do you think is like a simple thing you can do right now that they could start today or integrate into their life? The last question.
Yeah. Gosh, I don't think you asked this exact question, but I feel like I share this all the time and it's also so overused. But I really mean that this is so helpful to have truly 5 minutes. And it doesn't need to be meditation 5 minutes a day, but I do think if you can carve 5 minutes a day and just be like, let me play in these 5 minutes or let me be contemplative in these 5 minutes, it's basically that presence that you and I were talking about prior, because you expressed it so beautifully. Like your higher self will speak to you in that moment, or God, universe, whatever you want to call it. You will start, and don't put the pressure on, okay, 5 minutes, what's going to come, what's going to happen, what's going to come to me. But if you can just give yourself that and also release expectation and really just, again, present can be playing. I know for a lot of like young guys, like guys in their 20s and 30s, it can be like going outside and playing sports. 5 minutes doesn't sound long enough, but kicking a ball around for a few minutes can really bring you into that aliveness, that presence. And I do think over time, you do that for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you'll start to get some sort of clarity for sure.
Yeah, that's so good. I always think of surrender and faith. We don't we don't use the word faith enough. I think we've kind of, religion has hijacked it. But surrender and faith are twin flames to me.
Yeah.
And one cannot exist without the other. So surrender is the act of like releasing our grip, while faith is the trust that we are held in the fall. Like I can say, okay, Mackenzie, I'm going to do a trust fall with you. Those are like cheesy things that companies do. But I can say, I'm going to surrender to you. Yeah, I surrender. But it's not until I actually do it and let you catch me, is when, and that's, there's a faith with that. There's a dance of letting go and letting in, and then cultivating that practice to know that I'm not separate from the divine, that there is this greater plan unfolding. We all have an amazing plan. You're not your fear. And in that moment of fear, if you breathe into your heart that I trust, I trust, like the universe will cradle you. That's what it's there for.
That's the exact image I always have. I'm like, it's like a bed. It supports you. I always have that sort of visual. Absolutely.
That's amazing. Well, Mackenzie, tell people how they can I know we got the podcast in the show notes. What's your website? What are you doing right now? Kind of give an update of what's going on.
Yeah. Well, my website is just my name, but it's not the easiest to spell. So hopefully it will be in the show notes, MackenzieBelcastro.com. I will be hosting another podcast for a company called Pathfinders, which is a new thing. And that's exciting. It's this beautiful new company out of Canada. It's really all about amplifying the voices of people who are here doing work that's benefiting, whether that's the earth or other humans, or basically work that is for good. So they're launching, or they've already launched it, but they're going to be bringing on a few new hosts, including myself. So that's something new that I'll be doing starting in May. That's awesome. Yeah, that's really, I'm looking forward to getting going on that, but it's just starting to roll out now. So that's a little bit of my focus as well. And so with my own podcast, it'll probably still be there because I do find it very easy and just joyful to record. But I was saying to you off air before that I'm like, I don't know where that's going to where's the space? But as you wisely sort of guided me in that time, not pushing anything, but I do think ultimately it's not going to be something that really takes, let's say, excess energy to really get me to continue on with it, because it is just such a pleasure. So anyway, long answer.
Yeah, I like recording when I'm feeling it. I'll be like, okay, I'm gonna just do a real quick audio podcast because I've been thinking about this, or I've been meditating on this. So I'm just gonna do this real fast. It'll take 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
But we're going to have that all in the show notes. Mackenzie, as always, it's always great to talk with you and to understand the spiritual practices. You always kind of bring all the ethereal stuff that's out there kind of more into a practical way. And so I appreciate your wisdom and, your coaching abilities and everything that you do. It's amazing.
Thank you, Jason. It's always so fun to talk to you. I'll have to have you back on.